All right, so we're all seeing it, right? Companies everywhere are making these huge climate promises. But how do we know if they're legit? That's what we're diving into today. We're going to pull back the curtain on the global standard that's supposed to separate fact from fiction. It's called ISO14064-3, but you can just think of it as the Climate Honesty Rulebook.
So here's the game plan. We're going to start with the big question. Are these green claims a trust or a trap? Then we'll get into the rulebook itself. I'll introduce you to two key players, a past detective and a future forecaster. It's a super cool way to think about it. We'll look at how the actual checkup goes down, and then the big finale. What's the final verdict, and why does it all matter so much?
Okay, let's just jump right in. Section 1. Green claims. Trust or trap? I mean, you see it everywhere you look. Big companies, big promises about how green they are. But it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Who's actually checking their homework? And this really hits home for all of us, right? You're in the store, you see a label, carbon neutral. Or you see an ad, we're cutting emissions in half. And yeah, it sounds amazing, but there's always that little voice in the back of your head going, is that for real though? How can I actually know if it's true?
And you know what? There's a word for this. It's called greenwashing. It's basically when companies talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. They make these grand claims that are either totally misleading or just not backed up by any real proof. And that's the heart of the problem, isn't it? It just kills any trust and makes it impossible to figure out who's actually doing the hard work.
So, if greenwashing is the villain of our story, what's the hero? Well, that's what brings us to our next section, the Climate Honesty Rulebook. It's time to meet ISO 14064-3. This is the global standard that's basically designed to bring some much-needed accountability to the whole process.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. It looks like a super dense technical document. And, well, it is. But it's also an incredibly powerful tool. This is the official playbook that tells an independent checker exactly how to audit a company's climate claims. And here's the key thing to get. This standard isn't about how to make a claim. It's about how to prove that a claim is true. And this standard isn't a lone wolf. Nope, it's actually part of a bigger family. So you've got other parts, like Part 1, which tells a company how to count up its own emissions. But Part 3, the one we're talking about, that's the referee. It's the one that lays down the law for the auditor who comes in to check the math and call foul if something's not right. All right, this next part is where it gets really interesting. I love this way of thinking about it. The past detective versus the future forecaster. See, this standard really has two big jobs. One is all about looking back at what already happened, and the other is about looking forward at what a company promises will happen. Okay, so let's break down these two roles. First up, we have verification. This is our past detective. They put on their trench coat, grab a magnifying glass, and pore over historical data, like say last year's emissions report, to make sure the numbers add up. Then, on the other side, you have validation. This is our future forecaster. They look into their crystal ball, well, not really. They look at claims about the future, things like a brand new project that promises to capture a ton of carbon. Their job is to figure out if the whole plan is actually based on reasonable assumptions. So how does the auditor know which hat to wear, the detectives or the forecasters? It's actually super simple. They ask one question: is this claim about something that already happened? If the answer is yes, boom, it's a verification job. If it's about something in the future, then it's a validation. It's this really clear fork in the road that sets the stage for everything that follows. Okay, so that leads us perfectly into our next section. How does this whole checkup actually work? We get the what, verification and validation. Now let's get into the how. Let's pull back the curtain on the four main stages of one of these independent investigations. Now, before a single piece of paper is examined, the auditor has to live by a few core principles. Think of it as their code of ethics. First, they've got to be totally impartial. No skin in the game. Everything, and I mean everything, has to be backed up by cold, hard evidence. The final report has to be a fair and true picture of what they found. And this last one's really important. They have to be conservative. That means whenever there's a judgment call, they have to pick the more cautious option. These aren't just nice-to-haves. This is literally the foundation that the entire system's trust is built on. So the audit itself unfolds in four clear stages. First up is the plan. The auditor does some recon, or risk assessment, to figure out where the tricky spots might be. Stage 2 is to investigate. This is the real detective work, site visits, digging through data, following the paper trail. Then, Stage 3, evaluate. They take all the evidence they've gathered and hold it up against the rulebook, looking for any big mistakes.
And finally, stage 4 is the report. This is where they write up their official opinion, the final verdict. And that brings us to the grand finale, the final verdict and why it all matters. After all that planning and investigating, what's the actual result? Well, here's the thing. It's not just a simple pass or fail. It's actually way more nuanced, kind of like a report card. And that detail is exactly what helps build real, lasting trust. So let's look at this report card. The final verdict can come in a few different flavors. An unmodified opinion, that's the A+, gold star. It means the company's claim is solid, fairly presented, no major issues. Then you've got a modified opinion. This is like a B. It's pretty good, mostly fair, but the auditor found a few specific things you really need to be aware of. And an adverse opinion, well, that's an F, a straight-up F. It's a big red flag saying the company's statement is way off and you definitely should not rely on it.
And that is why this whole thing matters so much. This tough, evidence-based process, it creates the trust and transparency that we desperately need. It gives investors, customers, even regulators, the tools they need to see who's genuinely taking climate action and to separate them from the ones who are just, all talk.
So I'll leave you with this one thought. The next time you see one of those big, bold climate claims from a company, just remember, there's a rule book for this. And now you know to ask the single most important question. So, who checked your math? Thanks for diving into this with me.